Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Night Shift. Welcome in, of course, me and the rest of the Black and Gold Banneret crew. I'm Kyle Nash, the student of the game. You normally hear Jeff Sharon's voice here on the mic, but he is sitting in with us as well. Also, basketball guy Nick Porcelli, our stickball correspondent for this particular show, Bryson Turner, stickball correspondent. I know you're not a Sultan, Bryson, but that just means you're not as old as Eric Lopez. I think you know that, right?
What's the position below? What's the position below a sultan? The sultan, like the right hand man, the vizier. I don't want to make a Jafar.
I don't know. What was Jafar's title in Aladdin? That guy.
Yeah,
the royal vizier.
Yeah. Okay. See, I had the right idea. I don't know. It's like Jeff Sharon stepping in with the advice there. It's all about that Aladdin movie trivia. What can I say?
From one Robin Williams fan to another. I have to. Yeah.
This guy gets it. I like it. I like it a lot, man. So listen, let's jump into it. To this, we have the various topics on tap, but we would be remiss, gentlemen, if we didn't lead with the Pro Day performance taking place for the Big 12, of course. Among other people out there, UCF's Alec Haller, John Rice Plumlee, of course, Tylen Grable doing his thing, as well as Javon Baker. Just a lot of news out of there that listen, I've been critical of John Rice Plumlee on this and other shows as an actual NFL prospect, but he lit things up throughout all of that. What is it? He had a broad jump of 10.7, I think. He's his Bryce, I don't know if you got his 40 numbers there too, but he ran
4.49.
He ran a 4.540.
So I really could have just got by saying he ran a damn for his 40 and just showing off his athleticism. No one's here surprised by that, right? I'll put it this way.
He's an athletic guy.
Yeah, I think that's
he was fun to watch.
Right. Kyle, isn't that kind of the thing with JRP is that, like, you know, he's an athlete who plays quarterback. I mean, that was always kind of our thing. I think he presents a really interesting case study here, especially in 2024, because, he made some waves with a quote earlier a couple of weeks ago about how he's like, I'm one of the 32 best quarterbacks in the world. God bless you. That kind of confidence is the kind of confidence you want to see from a quarterback, right? But I think that, there's always room for development, right? Now, with one of the things that I think you and I both have talked about a lot is that, the pros get what the colleges give them, right? And the colleges get what the high schools give them. And that's how we've seen like the move toward more quick reads, spread option kind of stuff, that kind of, which is JRP's bread and butter.
Mm-hmm.
I, for one, think that, if you have a certain coach with a certain system, he might very well be someone that you might want to take a peek at. I don't see, I'm not going to stand here and say, he should switch positions. I mean, even though he played wide receiver, but that kind of speed is the kind of thing where, like, some enterprising GM, if he doesn't play quarterback, might be like, hey, you want to play wide out? Let's give this a shot. Right.
Bernard Robinson, for example. Yeah.
Right.
And listen, from
Terrell Pryor.
Terrell Pryor is another good example. Yeah. Both guys that transition doing that sort of thing. And Pryor's a better example. I'd make the argument. But Jeff, I've heard talk around the campfire, such that it is, that JRP has even said that he would entertain going to other positions. Quarterback, obviously his primary thing. For me, some teams that have been interested in it as a quarterback, not surprisingly, are franchises that have mobile dudes that depend on their mobileness, for lack of a better way to put it, to produce. For example, there's been some chatter and interest from the Ravens. One could see a world where you, at least athletically, sub in John Rice Plumlee for Lamar Demetrius Jackson. And here's my turn to throw you some throwback, Jeff. If I said the name Cody Pickett to you, a former 49er, would you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah. Former Pitt quarterback, right?
Excellent. Well, that's Kenny Pickett. I mean, Cody Pickett, going back farther than I don't know that both Pickett's played at Pitt. That would have been over my head, but no. Cody Pickett is going back in the days where Bryant Young was still a 49er. And I reference him specifically, Jeff, because he was a backup quarterback on the Niners roster who, get this full circle, also played special teams. Gentlemen, I know it won't happen. And even loosely, when he first arrived at UCF, I hinted at this then. I would love to see John Rice Plumlee in a position where not only he is a, let's say, third string quarterback or something like that, an emergency quarterback, but a guy who is returning NFL punts. That is one thing that athleticism would be most useful for, and a team that needs work on special teams and has an emergency guy that might be able to step in and keep their season from going completely awry, a la Jake Browning last year for the Bengals, something like that. That's really kind of what I would call the best case scenario for one John Rice Plumlee. That's where I live with all of that.
I think that's an interesting point to actually put that out there.
My thought was,
you're
right.
I want to see that. I want to see that man return some punts.
Well, here's one of the other things too, Kyle, is that he's another case where if there is nobody who wants to take a flyer on him, and if he decides to play, and if he's that much on getting a quarterback, he'd make a great candidate for a player in the UFL. I think if someone decides like, hey, I see something here, I want to work more of it, that would be a great spot for him too. But I think he wasn't. I don't know. It's NFL GMs, as we all know, they have a hard time letting go of somebody who's that athletic.
True.
Like we can find something for him to do, right?
Right, exactly. There's the traditional guys who are afraid to take a chance, but then the successful guys, see what I did there? Like the people like the Andy Reids and the Sean Paytons, who will take guys that you could use in different ways and apply them in different ways. I'll put it this way. Whoever, it was the Eagles, if I remember correctly, that got Adrian Killins. I feel like John Rice Plumlee is to some extent, larger Adrian Killins. If you could find a way to get AK in your offense, I see Plumlee doing the same thing. And in a rare instance, somebody who I think he's actually bigger than. And Plumlee's also, by the way, he's put on a little mask too, you could tell, to try to answer for some of the injury concerns, perhaps. But then again, in the NFL, if he's not quarterback, he's not at that same risk of taking constant hits and being the constant target behind the line. But with all that being said, and I've been pretty vocal about being critical of the NFL draft prospects coming out for UCF this year. But what I've been hearing about Javon Baker going around all the stuff, my work with the Jaguar Report, bing, with the bad voice, it's not working right now. Yeah, thank you, Jeff. But a lot of talk about Javon Baker going to Jacksonville has been something I've been hearing a lot about. Granted, I think he's a third-day pick, but a lot of people talking Javon Baker a second-day pickup for the Jacksonville Jaguars. You guys would be cool with seeing that, I'm sure, right?
Well, I'm never going to be opposed to seeing a UCF player playing in state. I think it would be interesting to see, him combined with Gabe Davis.
Yes.
That's for sure. I think my thing with Javon is, he's kind of like the, Chat GPT, give me a wide receiver. And
I like that.
And you get Javon Baker, right? I mean, he's 6'1". We talked about his speed, but I feel like we never really got to see this is going to come out bad, but I feel like we never really got to see full throttle Javon, like he's outrunning people, because the times when I saw him, anytime that he, made a big play, he was, maybe this is just a function of just how flipping fast that dude is he just looks like he glides. And that was, and to me, I look like that's NFL speed that he's got. I mean, he had 1,100 yards last year. I mean, but it was almost like, it was weird. It was like, correct me if I'm wrong here, Kyle, but it was like a quiet 1,100 yards.
As quiet as one could get, right?
Right. It was, yeah.
Like Boise State too, where he had this would have been another so many yards if it didn't fall out of his hands in the end zone. That kind of thing. So yeah, I'm completely, I know where you're at. There's been some frustrating games for this offense. I know where you're at by saying a disappointing or a quiet 1,100.
Well,
it's kind of like,
the whole regular season, forgive me, right? But the whole regular season, I just pulled up his numbers. The whole regular season, he never had a game where he caught more than 5 balls. against Georgia Tech, he caught 9 for 173.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's what kind of plays into it, because he had 4 100-yard games. He had his best game in the regular season was against Oklahoma, 5 for 134 and 2 touchdowns, including an 86-yarder. But
yeah,
but that's the thing, is like, when you're only catching no more than 5 balls a game, and that was twice. It's kind of like, but his yards per catch was so high, 21.9.
Mm-hmm.
That's what tells you like the kind of big hitter that you're thinking. But he showed us a little something more in that Georgia Tech game where he was like a real workhorse in that game. And I think, for a guy of his size, he'd look really good in a slot inside of Gabe. And can he beat guys off the ball? I think that's, pro defensive backs off the ball, because it's easy to, for college defenses to just sit back and be like, okay, we'll just double team you with a safety if you decide to go over the top, and yet still the guy averaged 22 yards a catch. So, but most of that was on, I think he did a lot of yards after the catch stuff too.
Sure. No, there's some there with the yak. Also, the one thing I would hold against him, I shouldn't say hold against him, but if I'm a GM, I'm tilting my eyebrow at, I don't want to use the term antics, but being out there on Twitter and getting chatty. You mentioned that very same Oklahoma game where he got away with something. He
did. Yeah, that's right.
And then got flagged later for celebration. NFL coaches are not going to tolerate that trash.
NFL defensive backs are not going to tolerate that trash.
Also an excellent point. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I won't take that away. But
they don't take too kindly to getting shown up like that.
If he ends up next to or in Jacksonville, you're not going to get a better set of good examples than Christian Kirk and Gabe Davis. So I think they'd be able to coach him out of that pretty easy, pretty quickly.
I know Gabe would.
Yeah, exactly. Well, listen, having talked to Christian Kirk in the locker room myself and got a little rapport with him, I can tell you they're of similar minds when it comes to doing your job and being professional.
It's hard to predict like which team you're going to go to, though. I mean, that's 1 in 32 chance, right? I mean, I think he is going to go somewhere. I would not be surprised to see him drafted. I also would not be surprised to see, as far as other guys, I think Jason Johnson has a shot to go, and Tre'Mon Morris-Brash, who I think he just took over games defensively. I mean, there was, I forget what opponent it was, but there was an entire second half where they were just like, wherever 3 is, we're running away from him. And they went, no, I think it was actually that same game. I think it was Boise, where Boise, in the second half, their adjustment, I watched it. I was watching Tre'Mon, wherever Tre'Mon was lining up, they were like, yeah, we're not running towards him. So we're just going to, is he lined up on the right? Okay, we're running this play to the left, guys. And then that's what they did. So.
No, I'm not knocking it too. And I'll say this, and this isn't a knock on Tre'Mon, but I feel like this is a guy where if he gets through the draft, if he's a UFA, he would get some play as a UFA in Jacksonville as well with their linebacker situation, such as that is. But this isn't an episode of the Duval Dive. We don't have to talk about the Jags anymore. Now, that being said, did want to bring in a little something from my time at spring ball. And gentlemen, I can tell you, being about a yard or two away from a close encounter from KJ Jefferson on the sideline, that's a big man, y'all.
That's a large human.
He is a large human. It's funny. I've been asking the O-lineman I've been talking to, including Amari Kite, how cool it is to have a quarterback big enough to throw a block. They all seem to unanimously enjoy it. Surprise, surprise. But the big thing I wanted to say about spring practice before talking about me representing the black and gold banneret being at Saturday's scrimmage. Thank you, sir. The big thing I know you're excited about, both from defensive players from the old and new schools, right? I talked to Brandon Adams a bit after the press conference, and also with Vanderbilt transfer Ethan Barr. And both of them highlighted two things. One of them obvious. Yeah, stopping the run. Yeah, it's cool that Brandon Adams and the DBs are concentrating on stopping the run. That's obviously a big deal. But they also mentioned something else that I know will make Jeff smile. Getting damn turnovers. That's been a focus as well. They're already keeping tabs in the DB room, according to Brandon Adams, about how many turnovers are getting in spring practice. And Ethan Barr also confirms, as he's getting in there, his role kind of in there is going to be a linebacker type. I think he's the right size to do that. Credit to Nikai Martinez for evolving quickly and coming in the first year playing safety, having to tackle the likes of the Big 12 running backs such as they were, but to see that there'll be an opportunity to have guys like Barr stepping in as part of an upgrade in size of that position is a fun thing to behold. So
yeah, it's a fun thing to behold, hearing them talking about, forcing turnovers too. Because as you guys know, like, I was always harping on like the one thing that we got to do with, and it's ever since really Scott Frost, right? The kind of offenses that we've been running.
Well, even Frost didn't have a lot of turnovers with that group, really. He had turnovers at key moments.
Their sense of timing was right.
Yeah.
But the key is always going to be, if you're running the air raid, if you're running Scott's thing, if you're running, what Gus is running, you got to get extra possessions and get the ball and get the rock moving downhill. Right. So, because if you get into a shootout, that's when things can get really spooky. If you give your offense a short field, you start stealing possessions, you can put opponents out of action in a hurry. And that's where I think, we had the 1 year, Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong, or Nick or Bryson, when Randy Shannon was still a defensive coordinator, where we were like one of the top teams in turnovers. And that really saved us in that 1 year. And we've and UCF has kind of fallen back in the rankings the last couple years in that category. And we don't know why, but it's something that we just, we always used to point out, and to hear them talking about, like, that's a point of emphasis.
Mm-hmm.
That's so huge for a defense, because it's a complement. It's a form of complementary football that we have to make work in order for this to happen, in order for them to reach the goals that they want to reach.
Yeah, I don't think that's an outlandish take. Heck, I think we've had variations on that, both from players and people on this panel, and Eric Lopez, going back to last year too. Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up. I'm thinking about the conversations that were had where some of Heupel's defenses, for all his alleged flaws and things like that people were complaining about, the argument could be made he had better defenses than Frost did his undefeated year. That's an interesting conversation we'll save for another time. Let's transition to this, though. Obviously, the men's basketball season has been I shouldn't say long closed, but closed for some time. However, some news coming.
It feels long.
What's that, Nick?
It feels long.
It feels long.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a minute since you've had to turn out a recap. I'll grant you that. But with all that in mind, news forthcoming that UCF has offered Coach Johnny Dawkins a 2-year extension. We're not sure the details of the money on it, but 2 more years to try to get something built and going in the Big 12. Your reaction, Nick?
Please sign it.
There's something for all the Dawkins haters out there, right?
No. I'm glad that they're at least offering him something, because, like, remember, like, I remember having conversations with you guys, like, shortly after the NIT loss. We were kind of, some people in this group, I won't say who, Eric, were like, was this his last game? Are they firing him? Is this it? Which, I think most of us will agree, no, he's building something. I'd like him to stay. So the fact that we're offering him something is especially good. And one of the other reasons I'm glad he's coming back is, so I think it might have been on the day of the NIT, Jalen Sellers had announced he was coming back. And when we talked to him after the game, basically the question was why, and he was sitting there with Johnny, and he literally just points at it and says, him. I'm coming back as a him.
That's it up too. As much as I've made the dad joke that I'm a buyer on Sellers is a buyer on Johnny, and he's been saying it publicly for weeks now, right?
Yeah.
On social media and pressers, like you mentioned, that moment you talk about too, Nick, is I think is an excellent example of all the talk that of the support he gets, not just amongst other coaches and other people in both conferences, I would add, but just within the building and stuff, and what he means. And here's the thing, and this is a point I don't think enough people had made really going into that NIT game. Yes, I know, blah, blah, USF, horns down, blah, blah, all. Sure. Here's the thing. Those fan bases, in particular, I can make the argument the USF fan base cares more about that than anybody on that floor did, right? There might have been 2 or 3 UCF players that were still playing actively in that, air quotes, rivalry when it was still a thing.
Are you playing the Power 5 card here, Kyle?
No, not in particular of itself. I don't give a darn if they're in the power 2, 4, 8, 6, 9, 12. If the power of 3.1469, whatever. Okay. My point is, I know USF isn't a member of the toughest basketball conference in the nation. That's the card I'm playing. You know, and listen, I asked Johnny about this last year when I was the basketball guy. Hey, is there any plan or are you looking forward to scheduling USF? Ironically, not in the NIT, obviously, but going towards playing Florida. I brought that up, you know, when things were starting to get solidified and it was, you know, we were more certain that the American was going to be in the rear view. He told me right then and there without hesitation, no, we don't really have plans to schedule them. That program and what I read from that, granted, this part's speculation. Let me put the window out there, the shingle out there to show that from the reaction I read, that's not a priority for that part of the program anymore. Now, I'm also on record saying this. I think it's a great idea for the stickball group, be it softball, baseball, that's why I say it the way I say it, to continue playing them because that group is still pretty hype about it from what I understand. You guys can verify that as you'd like, but from a basketball perspective, which is with as much turnover, especially lately as there been, I think the biggest, I should say, latest transgression against UCF by against UCF. Let me try that again. The latest transgression by UCF against USF was getting Michael Durr in the building. And I think that's the last, generally speaking, within the organization that they're really that worried about that as far as basketball. Now, the fans, hey, Twitter is Twitter. They're going to do what they do. I get it. But understand, you care more about it right now than they do. That's the only point I'm making. I'm not going full sports snob as you might expect from other members of this panel, certain sultans of stickball, perhaps. But you know, that's where I sit.
Let me put it to you this way. So you know how I like Bart Torvik's site because it allows us to statistically kind of reshuffle the season, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you flipped, and I know everyone's going to be like, "Oh yeah, sure, whatever, Jeff," but if you flipped, we did this last year with the close games, right?
Right.
And these games are decided literally by coin flips when you think about it. I mean, I've talked with coaches in multiple sports about like, you know, how do you literally, I remember asking one coach, how do you live with yourself with the idea that like your entire legacy is, you know, can sometimes hang on the thinnest of margins in something that you can't control. If you flipped the following games, all right, Iowa State, which UCF was with Iowa State all day. Cincinnati, that one, I think they really stick in their craw. Let's see. And Stetson. You flip those.
The second Houston game as well. I'd make a strong argument.
Yeah, Houston.
Well, Houston, but I didn't even flip that on. I didn't even flip that on Torvik. I just flipped, you know, those 3 games. UCF's in the tournament.
Well, and the reason why I mentioned Houston specifically, Jeff, you're going to try to tell me that if they had beat the number 1 team in the country,
oh yeah,
you know,
you flip that one, you know, you flip that one, you're definitely in the tournament because you would have had wins over to Iowa State and Houston, the 2 top teams in the Big 12. And in fact, if you flip that, I think Torvik's formula has UCF as a 7 seed.
I mean,
which, yeah, but think about that. Like you go from, it's just those games. It's not like it was in the American where like you had to flip a whole bunch of games in order to just get UCF a sniff of the bracket.
Right.
You flip a couple coins and all of a sudden, wham, you're not just in the tournament. You're sitting, you're in a pretty, you're like solidly in it, like a 7 or a 6. So that shows you the kind of margin for error and so, when I think about Johnny's extension, like, from a strategic perspective, like, why upset the apple cart?
Exactly.
I mean, and given that, who he's been, sorry, Kyle,
no,
but given the momentum that he's picked up in recruiting now, in addition to the job, and this is the part that Eric talks about, and he's 100% right in this. Yes, I said it. Eric's right.
Yeah.
What the job that Johnny has done, I know the job that Johnny has done in the transfer portal is truly remarkable when you look at what he's been able to do.
100%.
I said this. Don't give Eric that. Yeah, let's give all of us credit for that. Yeah. Oh, dude, please. Bryson said it more than I have. I'll even give him that. Listen. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And here's where I'll take it too. This is the thing. Great point about that you brought about the portal, Jeff. I don't want to cheapen that. But the thing that really just makes me want to flip a table are these Dawkins haters, the ones I constantly mock if you've seen me on Twitter or on this show, but fire Johnny, the people I'm talking to when I say that, right? These morons that come out and say, but they were 11th and 12th in the conference. Dummies. That's how much better this conference is. Don't you people get that at one point, the 25th ranked team in the country was 500 in this Big 12 conference? We talked about this show just last month, and they're still complete idiots griping about Johnny being offered this extension and doing this. Yes, I've been meaning to make this point for a while. That's why I'm doing it with my voice all messed up. But the punchline is this. Nick, get me off the ledge. Please tell me I'm not just a crazy man, or maybe I am, but I'm not wrong.
Get that man an oxygen.
No, you feel better? You feel better saying that?
You'd be surprised how much better I actually feel.
No, dude, I'm with you. Like, look, you said like people are going, we're 11th or 12th in the conference. Dude, we were projected to be last.
There's that too.
And you can make an argument that we really should have been higher, like Jeff just said. Who do you think caused that?
I think we dramatically outpaced expectations this year. I think,
and it's supposed to make a postseason.
I mean, if it's still going up and to the right, like, what are we what are we complaining about?
I don't know. Like didn't we at the start of the conference? Like, didn't we read some not even the conference, the season? Didn't we read some projection that said we were only supposed to win 1 or 2 conference?
Somebody
games?
Was like, "Congratulations if you win 1 conference game." I forget who it was.
More than that. And once again, you could have argued you should have had more. And you were talking about transfers. What was one of our best transfers? It was Jalen Sellers. Who brought him in? Johnny Dawkins.
Who is he? And who is Jalen Sellers invested in? Johnny Dawkins.
Yeah, but but remember, it's not just Jalen. It's
not just Jalen. It's everybody.
The entire roster was invested in Johnny because
they love the guy. They love the guy. Talk to anyone. They love the guy.
Yeah, but to Bryson's credit, and he thinks he's going to sneak this in and no one would notice, but he's wrong. I know why you said Sellers was invested. You went full dad joke, and I knew it. You didn't get away with that one. I saw it.
And let's also not forget too that I think what's really awesome, and the one thing I will get that maybe you could say knock Dawkins in the transfer portal is that but I think it's more of a symptom of college basketball culture as a whole. The roster turnover on men's basketball is certainly something that is not particularly ideal. That being said,
but that's the case the country over.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But Jalen Sellers, he's staying. He transferred in and he's staying. But then there's Dawkins himself, who has had to contend with that turnover. And let's remember this, by the way, because we might end up touching on this in a second. But with CJ Walker now in the transfer portal, Darius Johnson is the only person left on the roster that was here in the I believe it was the 2021-2022 team with Darius Perry and that group. Darius Johnson is the only person left on the roster from that time, and that's only a couple years ago.
Correct.
Right, but that's the case. But that's the case throughout Power 5 basketball too.
Throughout also the basketball program, Jeff, of football primary schools.
Yeah, I mean that's right. But the only places where you're going to see a lack of roster volatility is in your mid-majors, really in the middle and below of your mid-majors, because those guys really don't have anywhere else to go. Your higher mid-majors players, they're going to move up to power conference teams. And if you're in a power conference, you're trying to collect as much talent as you can. You're fishing in from, as UCF did, from mid-majors, right? Jalen Sellers himself came from, was it Ball State? I forget.
I think it was Ball State.
Yeah. Ibrahim Diallo came over from San Jose State, and UNLV as well. You're going to see way more roster turnover. Now, there's reasons for that. Obviously, the portal is a reason. NIL can also be a reason for that as well. But complain about it all you want, it's not changing. So it's how you navigate that roster turnover, that year in and year out, that shows your ability as a program and as a coach and as a recruiter. And this year, I think we finally saw what Johnny has always been we saw his strategy come to fruition. I'm going to build a team that is predicated on defense, on protecting the rim, on being super aggressive out and guarding the perimeter. And it worked. UCF had one of the best defensive teams in the Big 12, top 50 nationally. And the thing is about that is that, I've said this before, if you're going to predicate your team on offense, you're always going to be wondering whether somebody can figure out your system by the time you get to late February, early March. If you predicate your team on defense, we hear coaches say defense travels. Like when you go on the road, you play deep, but that's also the case when you travel from school to school. If you're a good defender, you're always going to be a good defender, no matter what. It doesn't matter what point guard you're playing with. It doesn't matter who the shooting guard is. You're a good defender. You'll always find a place you'll always have a place. And that's the thing that I think UCF and Johnny have predicated the program on is defense, defense, defense. And it worked.
I can't really build on that.
Last
basketball question I want to throw to Nick before we get Bryson into to Marshall stickball here. Obviously, it was alluded to earlier, CJ Walker entering the transfer portal. If and where he plays is a whole other question. Give me, let's say from anywhere between 1 and 10, with 1 being you're setting fires and questioning your life decisions, to 10 being you're not worried about it at all. How worried are you about the departure of one CJ Walker?
I don't know where I stand, so I guess I'll say 5. I'm in between.
Okay.
He's a good player. He brings leadership, but I love the guy, but he struggles with injuries too much, and he was never there. So, or not as much as you would like him to be. Let me say that, because he was there for a lot. He had some big games this year. But
you know what year he came in, Nick? He came in his first year at UCF was the COVID season.
Yeah, I was about to say 2020 because I remember
2021. Yeah.
And can he even play? Like, I feel like we were talking about this. Like, he has to apply for something, right? He has to be granted.
Well, I don't know the details on that.
It's possible for him to have another injury exception, but we don't know if there's been.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, hey, look, wherever he goes, I wish him nothing but the best. He was cool, always a cool guy to talk to. So But again, if Johnny comes back, I feel nothing but confidence that we'll find a guy who can step up and replace the production he gave us when he was on the floor.
Yeah, I could argue we have.
I mean, the good news is, I think, from the transfer portal perspective, is that we have a position to focus on, because not only did CJ Walker enter the portal, but also Marchelus Avery did as well. So with him gone and Ibrahim Diallo graduating out, that basically means that Dawkins has to restock the entire front court at this point, which is why Jalen Sellers coming back is such a good thing, because basically with him and Darius Johnson and hopefully Mikey Williams as well, Mikey Williams and other guards as well back there, the backcourt should be relatively stable going into next season, which means that Dawkins can basically focus most of his attention on the portal to restock that front court to replace Walker, Avery, and Diallo.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to have to be, but again, you can find really good defensive players in the front court as well. I think the other thing too that they're going to have to worry about is, Marchelus brought, some really good defense off the bench when they needed it too. I think that's the other part with the depth that they needed. Regarding CJ, I loved watching CJ play.
I know he's your guy, Jeff.
Yeah, he was my dude, man. And to watch a guy who, could jump out of the gym and was almost reckless in how he chased down rebounds was really fun to watch. And it was heartbreaking to see the fact that, his body just didn't cooperate with him for really the better part of 2 to 3 seasons.
Yeah.
Because I feel like as a fan, like we kind of got, the injuries that he suffered robbed us of seeing like all of CJ Walker, right? So my hope is that wherever he lands in a place where, we'll all be able to see the best of him. And I mean, because let's not forget, guys, he was a 5-star recruit out of high school. He went to Oregon to start out. And when he came here, I was like, oh my God, we got this 5-star guy with only 1 year out, out of high school. And he's a local kid too. So nobody can really make predictions on where players can go these days, because we just don't know what any of the details are. But wherever he goes, their fans are going to get a really, really talented player. And I hope it all works out for the best one. We saw him come on in some really key spots last year as well. He's shown that he can show it all. Now we want to see if he can. I hope that he can stay healthy consistently and continue to do that, because he really deserves it. He's a good kid. I'm going to miss him.
I hope he goes to Georgia so I could bug you the way you bugged me about Coach Abe. Anyway.
Oh my God. Could you imagine like, him going to the place where that Anthony Edwards came out of? Oh my God. What is going on in Athens?
Money.
So, hey, listen, no, that was a good exchange there. But Bryson, man, catch us up. Been a lot of action here going on with stickball. Give us the latest, my man.
That it has. So UCF has really bounced back well from a rough start to conference play against Oklahoma, where they managed to sweep a doubleheader against Kansas to take that series. Now, almost had a no-hitter against Jacksonville in the midweek, and now has done – I still can't believe it myself, and even though we're less than a day out, but they won by a walk-off hit by pitch for the second time this month to win game 1 against Texas Tech. This team.
I approve. I accept it.
This team just seems to find ways to win. I remember we were talking about how last year this team was very reliant on the long ball. This time around, it's much more diversified in how this team finds ways to win, because let's not forget, in order to even be in position for a walk-off hit by pitch, you need to load the bases in order to do that. The fact that UCF was able to do so in the bottom of the ninth, in the ninth twice is really I think really speaks to the improvement of this team in that regard. They also, of course, have Wiley Hartley joining the weekend rotation. He made his weekend debut against Kansas, and they won in the second game of the doubleheader, winning 4-1. Great job from him. It's one start, so we'll see what he'll do this weekend against Texas Tech. He's projected to go on Saturday, which is going to be the day that game 3 is because of Easter. And we'll see if he is in that position to do that. Bullpen. They showed up really well in Kansas. Dominic Castellano, Chase Santala, Kyle Kramer, great job. Once again, Kyle Kramer actually came back in Texas Tech to help save. It had this really cool play where he got the ball straight from the batter, and he ended up holding it and got the lead runner out at second, which was, I think, a major move in that game there. And but then also they had Spencer Bauer and Chris Sosnowski come in. And I mentioned this in my recap of the past couple of series. They need more depth on this bullpen, because while Santala, Kramer, and Castellano did a great job against Kansas, they can't do it alone every weekend. You need a whole full stable of pitchers in order to do that.
By the way, Bryson, where might we find your recap?
You can find it on the blackandgoldbanneret.com. There you go. So that.
Let me ask you this before you move on, Bryson, because you're telling me stuff, and granted, we're well aware of my lack of baseball acumen, but you're telling me a different approach offensively, right? Less long ball dependence, getting guys on base, doing things like this. You're telling me about smart heads up play defensively on the field and all that sort of stuff. It sounds to me like you're pro the transition away from Lovelady managing.
Yes, well, look, I remember back when Lovelady was fired. To me, this feels like a Mark Richt to Kirby Smart kind of move. Losing, because Mark Richt at Georgia was good, and Lovelady.
How did Georgia sneak so much into this show? Anyways, go ahead.
We told ourselves we wouldn't do this anyway.
Yeah, he was good, but the thing with me is that when the job opened up, it's like, all right, there were some good things still going on. The offense, for instance, as long ball dependent as it was still doing very well. And so when you basically flip the whole thing and you bring in a new regime, you wonder, hey, is that going to change going in? And you'd have to basically rebuild the entire way. Look what happened with women's basketball. So, but credit to Rich Wallace, because he kept Ted Tom, the hitting coach from the Lovelady staff, which means that they're consistent going in. And if anything, him working with the hitters as long as they have, and Rich bringing in some new blood in the offensive lineup really helped them diversify. I mean, Matt Prevesk and Jack Ziska have been absolutely essential. Braden Calise has even come on and really broken out so far in conference play. So that was definitely a major boon there. But basically, now that I've gotten Rich Wallace through some of this stuff, this was definitely a step up. But obviously, back in the moment where you thinking, oh, who are we going to hire? The whole thing was open. It could either work out really, really well or work out really, really bad. Luckily, it seems to be working out really, really good.
Jump in, buddy.
A couple of things I wanted to point out. Baseball's 1-8 of the last 10 since the sweep against Oklahoma. 5-2 in conference in that stretch as well. But the key is, and we can't forget about this, it has been the pitching. UCF right now, 295 teams in college baseball in Division I. They are 16th in the nation in WHIP as a team, 1.28 walks or hits per inning pitched. Behind only Oklahoma State in the conference and behind only 15 other teams. They don't walk anybody. They're 31st in the country in fewest walks allowed per game. The hitting numbers have been fairly, nothing against Ted, but like fairly pedestrian, to be fair. But here's the thing. If you're shutting guys down, you're going to be okay. And so far the pitching staff has been nothing short of fantastic. And I made him mention this. Sorry, Kyle, but I made him mention this to Eric a couple of weeks ago. This team reminds me of the COVID team. That the team that could have been Lovelady's best team. I think it was on pace to be when COVID shut everything down. Why? It's because of the arms, man. They shut teams down, and we're seeing UCF do that again this year.
Yeah, that's true. Under Lovelady, comparatively, we've seen pitching struggle. Even if I'm noticing it, that should tell you everything.
And due to no small part due to injuries. We've seen a fair number of Tommy Johns running around there, but so far we've managed to avoid the injury bug. Knock on wood. So,
Bryson, before we call you back in, you did say something about the offense being relatively pedestrian, Jeff. What's that? Are you talking as far as scoring runs or batting average? Like
a little bit of everything there so far. Even though they're 90th in the country in batting average at 290 as a team, their on base percentage is way lower than that. It's 381.
I'm hearing you.
See a 6.7 runs per game, which is 153rd. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just saying that they're kind of middle. They're kind of middling right now, right?
Nothing like last year's group. Bryson, what do you got?
I will rebut what Jeff just said. And that while I will say that there are certain games where the pitchers definitely have the UCF batters' number, I think the key thing that is that the UCF offense, even if they're having a bad game, they step up where it counts. Because you look at
timing, yeah.
Because you look at for example, Matt Prevesk, for instance. I mean, the guy has been one of the best hitters, like just getting on base, batting average wise, I've seen in a couple of years. Jack Ziska has also done a very good job as well. Andrew Sundin has gotten on base fairly consistently, of course, but of course that's nothing new for him. But those guys. And Braden Calise, too, actually, he really stepped up in the doubleheader. But what's, I think, really key about this offense is that it's diverse enough to where if most of the batters are having a down day, there's always that one that is able to maybe get something going.
Right. But that also plays into what I was saying, which is in order to be in the position to get the timely hits, you need to keep the other team off the board.
See, I was going to use that very point to transition into softball, and that's
why you're a better baseball person than you think, Kyle. But
no, I just
guys. But and the other thing that I think that UCF does fairly well, and they don't get enough credit for this, fielding, second in the Big 12 in fielding percentage, 979, 25th in the country, and when you have guys backing up good pitching, you'll always have a chance.
Can't front on that. I think that's a good one to walk off with into. Listen, I know that Eric isn't here, that you are replacing the award-winning Sultan, but it's you had mentioned, I think a couple weeks back when you and I had done a pod together, Bryson, that the softball schedule would be a gauntlet in conference. Is that what we've seen?
Oh, yes, absolutely. In terms of softball, they have been going through it the past. Look, this is I would be hard pressed to because it's been a while since softball's had a losing streak like it has. But to be fair, most of those losses, 6 of them, came against 2 top 5 ranked teams in the country. And they're not that far back of wins either. They're not really that far.
Oklahoma and Texas.
Yeah, so Texas was a thing. I know that was a big deal.
They're not really that far.
So, Texas is 3rd in the RPI. Oklahoma's 4th. So there you go.
They're not that far off. I mean, look, like game 1 against Oklahoma State, 2-0. Game 3 against Oklahoma State, 6-4. Game 2 against Texas, 4-2. Game 3 against Texas, 3-1. 4 of the 6 losses against Oklahoma State and Texas were by 2 runs, which it's not much. And against the top team in the country like it was, and Texas, that 4-2 loss against Texas, by the way, they were tied for a good bit in that game. So while I definitely will say that losing 6 games in a row, like getting swept 2 weeks in a row, is not fun.
Not great, Bob. Yeah.
When you keep it as close as softball has been able to do, I think showcases how talented this team is. They just needed the offense to step up a little bit, or on the other hand, you look at the pitching staff. And I believe Eric expressed a little bit of concern of this coming into this season, is that you have to get the pitching staff deeper beyond Sarah Willis.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we've seen that as much. It's not that they've been bad, by the way. Caitlin Felton really held her own out there.
But when you're facing elite competition.
Exactly. And so for the competition that these pitchers have been facing, they've been doing a pretty solid job. In fact, Caitlin Cochran came in against Texas and actually went and pitched hitless softball for 2 innings, even striking out a couple of them. So it's not that the pitchers haven't had some bright spots. It's just that, these are some of the most talented softball hitters in the country.
Well, let me ask it this way then, for Bryson and Jeff both. Nick, if you want to weigh in, wherever you want to weigh in, of course, please do. But if you're playing the role of softball UCF fan therapist, is the answer simply put that brighter days are coming just on the strength of the fact that the paramount of the country isn't on the other side of the mound there?
Well, I'll say yeah, because right now they're out in Lubbock. They beat Texas Tech last night 8-5.
Had to come back
and came back to do it. And Texas Tech is 34th in the country in RPI. So that tells you,
if you're doing that in the comeback scenario, your pitching staying alive late, and then your offense is doing it.
Yeah. Right? And here's the thing to remember, this almost hilariously difficult schedule that UCF has been playing. They're 15-14 overall, which is good enough for 42nd in the country in RPI. Just look around them. Right behind them at 43 is Indiana, and Indiana's 23-9. FAU's 46th. They're 28-8. Boston University is somehow out of the Patriot League is 38th, 4 spots ahead of UCF, and they're 27-3. So that gives you an idea of what we're dealing here. And as we look at the upcoming schedule for UCF, okay, you got one on the road in Lubbock. Man, if you can get another one on the road, I would consider that a big, huge dub. You got North Florida coming up. All right. I don't know where North Florida is in the RPI, Bryson. You could probably check me on that. But after that, you've got BYU.
That's going to be a fun series.
That's going to be a huge one. And I think that's a very winnable series for UCF. BYU 48th in the country in RPI. So, you get 2 out of 3 there. I think you're sitting pretty. Houston's coming to town on April. That's for 3 starting on April the 12th. And
it's at Houston.
Oh, it's at Houston. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Sorry about that.
No
but, again, Houston, where do we have them? Okay. They're at 80. So that's another, opportunity there to start putting some dubs on the board and get, a little bit more cushion between you and a 500 record. Baylor is number 19 right after that in the middle of April.
That's the next time they face a top 25 team, by the way.
Right. And then they get Oklahoma again at home on the 26th, 27th, and 28th. So it does set up where you can start putting a couple marks on the board before you get to this latter part of the schedule where you have to face Oklahoma at home, and then you got to go to Iowa State before you go to the Big 12 tournament. So I'm not worried so much about the plus minus win-loss record, at least not as of yet, because I think there are some chances for them to kind of get a little, gain a little bit more ground. And obviously they're not where they want to be RPI wise. You want to be up closer to the 40 mark, but or rather inside the 40 mark, I should say, because right now they're at 42. But I still think there's some really good chances for them to boost their mark here a little bit as the season starts as the conference season starts to heat up.
Yeah, well, and the fair analysis from both of you on that. Let's close out the softball section with this, because I know there's something Bryson wanted to touch on, and he met the terms I set for him leading into the show, so I'm gonna let him talk about it. But before we do that, quickly, 1 sentence, 2 tops. Do you see UCF softball participating in postseason action? Jeff, start with you.
Yeah. As of if the season ended today, yes, it would be tight, but I think they would get in.
Bryson?
I would say ask me that question in a couple of weeks after BYU.
That's a cop-out.
All right, look. All right, look. I think as of this moment,
Porcelli.
As of this moment, I think they will make the postseason, but I don't see them getting out of a regional. I think that's safe.
That's an answer. I'll take that answer.
I was much better than that other trash you were trying to hand me. I was doing my best Ibrahima Diallo impression with that. Get that out of here. Send that to the block party. Anyways, with that in mind, of course, you'll read a lot of the work for a lot of the other sports that UCF participates in on likeagoldbetterate.com. But Bryson Turner had something in particular he wanted to prop up for men's tennis. Bryson, what do you got?
Yes, so men's tennis has now entered into conference play. They just played their first home conference match last night against number 26 Oklahoma State. It's a game that went down to the wire, gentlemen. I was following this while I was watching baseball, but Leighton Cronje, the team's lone senior, managed to take the win in that one. He won the third set 7-6, 7-5. All 3 of his sets went into like that tie-breaking area, by the way, which that's a lot of tennis to be played. And it was against the number 70 ranked player in the country, Isaac Bancroft. But this is also coming after the men's tennis team swept the number 27 team in the country, Baylor. Baylor, and now they're 2-1 in conference play. And I said this before, when you look, even though that this season has been a very historic season for men's tennis, they not only went 7-0 to start the year, best season opening winning streak in program history, but they then went 14-1, which is the longest the best record they've had in a season in program history in 15 games. That's historic all on its own, but it's coming off the bat of a schedule that I would say is rather soft. It's not rather soft. Like they don't get me wrong, they played like Miami, which was good, but and then their one loss was against Florida. But I really wanted to see what they could do against these Big 12 teams. A lot of them, most of them are ranked within like the kind of that top 30 range. They go to Baylor and sweep them. That right there, I think, is a very good sign. And you look at how they won. They won with their lower courts, which goes to show you the depth of this team. So while perhaps the highest pitchers might not match up with the highest of the other teams, their depth is what's been making up for it. And that's the same case in Oklahoma State against Oklahoma State as well.
Kyle, UCF men's tennis right now 29th in the country in the ITA rankings, and those two teams that Bryson just mentioned that they beat were 26th and 27th. Wow. So as it stands right now, they're heating up at the right time. So
panties, folks.
I know. No, the mojo's back. Now they got number 22 Oklahoma on Saturday. They at home. They got Texas Tech at home April 4th. They got BYU at home April 6th, and then they go to number 3 TCU.
Ooh.
So and that's before the Big 12 championship. So you got again another chance to put some dubs in your back pocket, including against another nationally ranked school that's a little bit ahead of you right now in Oklahoma, and then you test your mettle against the Frogs. And I think it's been fun to watch how this team has come together. You know, it felt like Bryson, correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like all the things that have gone wrong for UCF men's tennis last year have kind of gone right in the same ways this year, right?
I think so, but it helps the fact that the most of this team is made up of sophomores. They were all freshmen last year.
Yeah.
So I feel like a part of that is this team also really gelling together, which is really good considering they had to bring in a new head coach, Lloyd Bruce Burgess, in order to do that. So absolutely well done from this men's tennis squad. And
shout out to Lloyd. Shout out to Lloyd. He's got the job done.
And I will say a very good sign for the popularity of this men's tennis program. The most recent Kingdom NIL donation was just made by a guy named Rhett Rosen living out in California. It was for basketball. Basketball was one of the sports, but the other two, the men's and women's tennis teams, getting a Kingdom NIL donation. First one, if I'm not mistaken. If that doesn't show you that's at least there is somebody that has solid resources, that believes in these players, that wants to help retain them, I don't know what to tell you about, at least to say in this program at this point.
Even the Power 5 snobs like Eric Lopez have to respect that for certain. Yeah, I think you're right in the announcement itself. They mentioned that was tennis first collective gift. No, great drop all the way around, and a showing thing, a assuredly positive thing, a positive picture of things to come. And like I said, I didn't say hold on to your panties. I said hold on to your bannies. So there'll be awards there.
Good save. I'll allow it.
Yeah. I said bannies the whole time. It's not my fault. You're deaf. Come on now. I got an old joke. This is your fault, Jeff.
Yep. And I will mention, while women's tennis got a Kingdom NIL donation as well, you can hear more about their performance in Big 12 conference play, along with rowing and track and field, who are getting some seasons started on their own. Track started outdoor recently. Go read all about that on the Nightcap on blackandgoldbanneret.com. Thank you.
By the way, including coverage of a certain cross country runner that's on this panel as well. As well as on the Black and Gold Banneret YouTube channel. Bryson, wrap it up, sir.
Don't watch the second one, guys. I'm so out of it in that. I looked drunk. I was so beat after that race. Oh my god.
We knew we had to step it up because
Look at him repping. I love it.
Because last year when we did this, it was just me and Nick at the Knights invite afterwards. This year we had to step it up because not only did Nick step it up with 2 events this time, but I was able to bring Eric Lopez along after he had just announced the softball games, and we were able to talk to Nick together afterwards. So
listen, Nick, just be glad we're not strapping a GoPro to your forehead when you go to one of these matches.
Yet
For the content.
Eric basically suggested that I do that next year after the race.
I said yet.
hey, if your club president allows it.
Oh,
Hey,
why not?
Hey, where do you think I'm going
You
tomorrow,
run
by the way?
distance. You run
Painful
distance.
for another
Drag
decade.
is not an issue. So
Yeah.
Gentlemen, since we can talk about GoPros and all that stuff, I think that's a good place to wrap this particular edition. So, special thanks to Jeff Sharon for letting me have the helm for this one. Nick Porcelli doing his part repping basketball. Bryson stepping in for the Sultan of Stickball himself, Eric Lopez. I am Kyle Nash, the student of the game for the Night Shift podcast. An honor, joy, and privilege. But until next time, class dismissed.